Hey y'all, hope you're doing good today. So in today's message, I want to share some thoughts on how you know, like what is the major indicator that you are in the latter stages of your healing. You know, kind of like you've done the heavy lifting, you've done the hard work, and you're ready. You're ready for something new in your life. Right, a new stage, just newness. Your heart has been expanded, it's been healed. What is the indicator of that? So I hope you enjoy the message today. So, yes, in my notes I put the greatest indicator that your life force energy, that's really what I'm talking about. What is the greatest indicator that your life force energy is returning? And it's kind of like we've talked about in all my past videos, and you'll hear a lot of other people talk about this with regards to essentially psychological abuse. Your mind gets so scrambled. I'm just, a good analogy is kind of like when you're, especially like the older TVs, you know, when you're changing the channel and you get to one that's not receiving a signal and it's just scrambled. It's just the, I forget what you call it, but it's like the black and white, you know, fuzz, right? It's totally not the right word, but you know what I mean? So that's what happens to your mind. It's kind of like those old campaigns, you know, where it's like, this is your brain when it's healthy and this is your brain on drugs. It's kind of like psychological abuse. It does a number on your mind, and if you've been there, I don't have to explain it, you know what I mean. But it also does a number on us, not just emotionally but spiritually, and it's really hard to explain, not just to others but even to comprehend it ourselves. And I think that's what sets a lot of us off on this quest, this journey of trying to understand it. Like even if you thought you were a spiritual person beforehand, when you go through this kind of stuff, it affects you on such a level that you just feel this strong drive to truly grasp it. And what winds up happening is you go on a spiritual journey, and you grow so much in that area. So the best way I can relate that in language is just to call it your life force energy. That's, to me, a good representation as a metaphor, right? Of what gets impacted on that spiritual level, because you just kind of lose motivation for life. It's sort of like, I've called it the spirit of decay in the past. It's kind of like that. It's kind of like you become spiritually inert, I think is the right word. And so you're just emptied. And a lot of times it's kind of easy to understand on one hand, because you're so drained. There's so much expectation that's placed on you when you are intimately engaged in a relationship with a controlling person, because they're feeding off. It's a vampire type energy. They're feeding off of your reactions, so they continually provoke you. And even once you get past that, or just a separate point besides that, you might say, is the fact that you see that this person is unhappy, and they I'm talking specifically about people who are very covert in their manipulation. And so there's this unspoken understanding between the two of you that you kind of feel like you are in this caretaker role, and like their contentment depends on you being a certain way, or doing certain things, or not doing certain things. And so that's the way that they can control you, is by the act that they're putting on with their emotions, you know, that you're disappointing them, or that you've upset them. And they may even say, if you're like, hey, what's wrong? They may even say nothing, but it's going to be like that, nothing. Or it's going to be like, oh, I'm fine, you know. But you can tell, you can feel that vibration, that frequency, that energy coming from them, that things are not in fact, fine. So it's, they control you in that manner too, but it's just very draining. It conditions you to be hypervigilant, to walk on eggshells. It just drains you energetically. But the result spiritually is that there's nothing left for you. You know, there's that old saying, you can't pour from an empty bucket, or something like that, and that's so true. And so we're going to kind of talk about this life force energy and relate that to the major sign that you are in fact healed, or at the latter stages of your healing, or mostly healed, right? So because healing is important, but it's kind of like, what is the result? What is the goal of healing? I would say restoration, to be restored, to be renewed, right? So let's take a look at that word, restoration. In the late 14th century, it's a means of healing or restoring health, a cure, renewing of something lost. So in the later 15th century, also restoration meant the repairing of a damaged or deteriorated building. So at first, this secondary definition doesn't really seem to be relevant to our message, right? But consider this. In 1 Corinthians chapter 6, verse 19, it says, I love how it says, what? It opens with what? What? Know ye not that your body is the temple of the Holy Ghost, which is in you, which ye have of God, and in ye are not your own, right? So two things to note here. First of all, our bodies are temples. They're spiritual structures. They are vessels. They contain this life force energy within us. So restoration is the repairing of a damaged or deteriorated building or structure. So again, whatever's true, you know, out here is true in here. It's just, there's just truth in all the different I think the word is fractals of it, little pieces of it, signs of it everywhere, right? But it's all the same kind of like law of truth. And so again, the spirit of decay has done its number on our vessel, and kind of disconnected us from the way we were designed to operate, right? And so that restoration, when we get to, we've done all this work in the healing part, right? But there comes a checkpoint. I'm thinking of like when you're playing video games and you reach a certain checkpoint, and then if you die after that and it restarts again, you get to have another shot at it, another go at it. It puts you back at you don't have to start all the way over at this level, which is good. It usually puts you at this checkpoint that you had reached, and you can start again from there. I'm learning, this is all new for me, but you know, my daughter and I've shared with y'all, we're playing video games now. It's pretty fun. So yeah, it's kind of like all this first, you know, stage, second and third, or however many there are that you've gone through of healing, all this work you've invested, you do reach a point of harvest, of there being something, a result of your work, which is, you know, thank God. And that point is a point of being restored, right? And I think there's layers to that, personally. And I think that it's not just a, you know, they say healing isn't linear. I don't think it's realistic for us to expect that we just get there and that's it. Just like the video games, you may get there and then you may stumble again and you may have to kind of start over again. So just always give yourself grace. In fact, I've got my bracelet here. Walk in grace and live loved. I love these little knitted bracelets. They're from Handmade Bits by Tracy out of Tennessee, but I bought it years and years ago. I'm not even sure if she still makes them, but they're really cool. Anyway, yeah, so I also want to note here in that verse that I shared with you all, 1 Corinthians 6:19, where it says, you know, don't you know, essentially, don't you know that your body is the temple of the Holy Ghost, which is in you, which you have of God, and You are not your own. You are not your own. So here's a little important side note, okay? So this is how I view this. When somebody intentionally harms you, tricks you, deceives you, abuses you, they are actually, the people that do that to you, they are actually the ones who are deceived, because everything we do to one another is actually acted upon the entity inside the temple. This is why we can say it's you know, not flesh and blood, the battle. It's spiritual. It's a spiritual thing, spiritual warfare. This is exemplified in Colossians chapter 3, verse 23, and in Romans chapter 12, verse 19, where it says, in the New International Version, it says, leave room for God's wrath. To me, that's kind of like, you know, once you've identified somebody is toxic, harmful, they have the, you know, the spirit of the dark side in them, they're wolf in sheep's clothing, however you want to call it. Once you've identified that, you need to make room for God to do what he's going to do, right? Because we all, I view life in terms of, you know, karma being real. You know, there's the law of cause and effect. And so whether this person has been cruel to others or cruel to you, you just want to distance yourself as much as possible. And that's exemplified right here in this verse. Leave room for God's wrath, because it is his to repay, not ours. We feel like it was done to us. But if we remember that we are in fact a holy temple, we are a vessel for the Spirit inside of us, this life force energy inside of us, then the what's the word I'm looking for? I'm trying to build up my vocabulary. Is it qualm? I don't know. The issue is not really between this person and us. See, it's between this person, if they're willingly doing it, it's between this person in conjunction with the dark side and those dark spirits and energy with the spirit inside of us. See, so God's like, get out of the way, let me do what I need to do. So, and it's not that we want, I don't feel like, you know, anything bad to happen to anybody. I certainly don't. But it's just a matter of understanding that it's not our place, you know, and we truly want to strive for a life of peace for ourselves, and just, you know, ideally for everyone. We want everybody to find the light and walk in the light, right? But the point here is that it's not our burden to bear. It's just not. So that's an important place to get to in your heart. I think it's just to understand we can let that go and let that law of cause and effect do what it's supposed to do. Again, because it's God's design, right? So of this human experience. All right, but at some point on your healing path, all the work you've put in will begin to sprout. It will begin to produce fruit, and your consistency will make it, you know, healthy. It'll make it thrive. It'll make it, you know, continually bloom. You have to, it's that whole verse, you know, faith without action is dead. You have to, you know, put some effort into it, right? So what we're talking about today, the sign of restoration, like genuine, you know, restoration, genuinely getting there to a good place again. We're talking about getting to the stage of detecting, if we're using an analogy, detecting that fragrance, right? Discerning the indicators of fruit that is ready or almost ready to harvest, you know. So when you're imprisoned in darkness, there is no fruit. And I'm sure if you've been through this, you're relating to this. It's kind of like your life is put on hold because you are not, in fact, serving, well, it doesn't seem like you're serving the kingdom of God. It seems like you're just serving this person, but really, again, God always has the upper hand. So that's, you know, take heart in that, you know. He's going to work everything for the good of those who love him. But it does feel like your life is on pause. It feels like this other person's they're in the driver's seat, period. And you're just being taken for a ride. There's a reason that's a saying, you know what I mean? So, it feels like a lot of wasted years, but God will produce beauty from ashes. There will be good things to come from it. If not, if you haven't already seen it, which you may have, but if you haven't already seen it, you will. And so, but just as far as the laws of nature, you know, we know that, say you plant a fruit tree, you know, in the middle of a forest. Well, it's not going to get any sunlight, right? So it may live, but it may not ever produce even any blooms to turn into, you know, fruit. So, relate that to yourself being cloaked by, you know, these dark limbs in a forest. And, you know, you may have been surviving, but you're not producing anything. And that wears on you, you know, when that's not your nature. When your nature is to produce and create, because you are a child of the Creator, then you're living kind of, you know, cut off. You're handicapped in that manner spiritually. So relate that to yourself. You know, in the darkness, you're not going to produce fruit. So you have to have spent, again, this is where all this time after you've left a bad situation and you've done work, you know, as far as healing, you have to have already spent sufficient time out of the darkness and in the light for the fruit to be cultivated. What does it mean for something to be cultivated? It means that it's been nurtured, right? And to be grown and taken care of. So during our healing, we may long for better times, but if you'll notice, everything seems to be tinged in this darkness. There's like this dark cloud, you know? So even if you try, it's, you know, this is the period in your life where you may not be consciously aware of these dark energies, spirits, people with dark intentions around you or whatever. You may not really have identified them yet, but whatever you try, every time you try to take a step forward for yourself or for others or anything that you try to do, this is that period in your life where it just doesn't produce anything. It doesn't go very far, or it's shot down immediately, or whatever it is. And you may be confused as to why. And that may be why. It may even be your health that you see this is happening with. It can be a lot of different things. But this may be the sign to you in the darkness that something's wrong, because you're like, I know all these past years of my life, I know how this works. I do the work. There's the law of cause and effect. You may not consciously say it in those terms, but you understand it on some level, and you're like, and there's an effect. Well, now it's not happening. Why is that? You're in the darkness. You're in the darkness. So it's kind of like that old saying, where there's smoke, there's fire. It's kind of like you're detecting the smoke. Well, on the flip side, when you're out of it, how do you know that healing has actually cultivated something good for you? You're going to detect not smoke, but fragrance. It's going to it's going to be very subtle in that way. The spiritual realm works, in my opinion, per my experience, in that way, in the subtle way. Both the darkness can be very, very subtle, and because of that, a lot of people miss it. And that's why the wolves in sheep's clothing can be so successful. But it also, the spiritual realm works in the subtle manner for the good too. And so you're going to kind of start detecting, maybe the fruit's not just going to, burst forward, but maybe you start to see the blooms, metaphorically speaking, in your life. You're seeing that. You're smelling the fragrance. It's just a very subtle shift, but you'll notice it. You'll notice it. And I'm going to elaborate on that a little bit more, so that it's not so abstract. Okay, but let's don't get ahead of ourselves. So when you're in the darkness still, again, everything is just kind of black and white, or I'm thinking of like in my old graphic design days. with my programs, my software, you know, it may just be grayscale. It's just all, you know, there's no color, there's no sparkle, there's no, I'm thinking of, there's a song my daughter loves, and I think it's a Barbie song, but it's really cool, and it's talking about life and color. And the lyrics go, yes, I have it memorized partially, but it says, life and color is so much clearer. So as an artist, from an artist's point of view, it's like, why is that? It's because contrast, you know, if you same thing with the Pocahontas song. Y'all know I've got my head, you know, just being flooded right now with different things, but you know, where she sings in the Disney movie, you know, can you paint with all the colors of the wind? And she elaborates on that, you know, what that means metaphorically in true life. And so spiritually speaking, that is a great representation of that life force energy. It's multifaceted. It's remember, with God, there's no limits. You know, nothing shall be impossible to you with God, right? And that's I wrote that verse down here somewhere. Yeah, Matthew chapter 7 verse 20. Nothing shall be impossible to you. So it's like you get the full palette. And so but it's the contrast, it's the ability to use everything, right? That makes especially when you're talking about painting, it's what makes it beautiful. Like I've gotten into watercolor. This is new to me. In the past, I was like in college, I did oil painting, and I've done acrylic paintings in the past, and then I got into encaustics, and I still love encaustics with wax. But I'm learning watercolors, and I'm having a lot of fun with it. I don't get to spend quite as much time with it as I'd like, but I'm hoping to get into it a little bit more as time goes on. But anyway, I love these galaxy paintings that I'm watching people do online. And what makes them really, really beautiful and realistic is the more contrast you can create in these layers. It's just, they're just stunning. They're beautiful. And then you know, you take an old toothbrush or something and you splash some, you know, opaque white paint, and it makes your stars. It's really cool, but it's the contrast that matters. And so it's kind of the same way with our life. You know, you start out naive, and you know, you're wearing the rose-colored glasses, and you think everything's cool and good, and you know, stuff, you're positive, and then you experience this darkness, and then when you come out of it and you do the work, and you do reach a stage of restoration, the good stuff's even better. It's amplified and magnified, because now you have contrast. You have perspective, because you've been exposed to the alternative. It makes you appreciate life a whole lot more, I can tell you that. Same thing for people who have had what they call near life or near death experiences. I don't know why I was thinking near life, but yeah, it's like in paintings, especially those galaxy paintings, it's that contrast that makes them beautiful. But you know, when you have reached the stage where your healing is starting to prove to you that it has been worthwhile, and you are getting to a better place, the stage of restoration, you're going to get to a point where there's literally not enough time in the day to do everything you want to do. And it goes back to that old saying, you know, time flies when you're having fun. It's true. It's very true. So this is it. This is it. To me, this is the biggest indication that you're there. You're there. You're embracing what life has to offer again. Right? There's a strange video on my feed, I don't know, middle of the night or something. I woke up and couldn't go back to sleep. I don't remember when it was. It was very recent, this morning or last night sometime. And somebody had passed away, and somebody else that had known this person was looking over, you know, their house or their stuff, and they saw something at the sewing machine or something. There was a project that they had been working on, and it was just left unfinished. That was it. You know, because the person was gone. And they described the scene as haunting. And I'm just thinking, why that? Why haunting? Shouldn't it be beautiful? To me, that means that this person was living their life. They were actively waiting, like we were talking about yesterday. So Because we know, in contrast, some people seem to literally be sitting around just waiting to go. It's like they're just waiting on Jesus. That's it. And they're not actively waiting. They're just waiting. So we want to be actively waiting, right? And waiting ideally not for death either, but for the desires in our hearts. This is the difference in somebody who has a mindset of lack and someone who has a mindset of faith. So there's life in every moment, and it's too short to be wasting it. And I know you know that, but sometimes it's just good to hear it, you know, just to remind yourself. What is wasting your life? I would say just not appreciating it, you know? But I think it's really, really important here to say this. We need to honor and validate the times that our heart has been so injured that we can't be in a state of gratitude. We just can't. Because that would be gaslighting ourselves. And when you're around a person who just wants to brush over what you've been through, or deny what you've been through, or spin it like, you know, why don't you just decide to be happy? That can be very harmful to you, you know, especially during a lot of stages of your healing. So just, you know, I would advise you to shield yourself or cover yourself, you know, put on that armor, spiritual armor, and don't expose yourself to that kind of stuff. You know, if your heart's not in that place to receive, you know, an encouraging message of gratitude, it just means that it needs to be honored. It needs to be heard, you know, first. What you've been through needs to be validated and not ignored. That's what toxic people do. They ignore what they've been through. They don't do the work that needs to be done in order for introspection and to heal and grow. And it does require work. But these lighter energies will begin to return at some point if you truly invest in your healing. And instead of it coming from your own striving, this is I know I talk about doing the work, but there's a subtle difference here, and I want to point it out. To me, these lighter energies, right? This spirit of renewal and being restored will come about not because you're striving directly for that, but it'll come as a result of your faithful actions directed elsewhere. And it will be a result of your faithful actions directed elsewhere. Let me give you an example. Again, we're talking about the law of cause and effect. So it's kind of like if you sow into your problem, you're thinking about your problem, like let's say you're doing the work of your healing and you're wanting to get to a place of feeling good, but you're sowing your mental energy and spiritual energy into feeling justified or vindicated or whatever all these kind of terms are that are still kind of like attached to the problem. You know, and this can be through a lot of things, you know, journaling about it. And I'm not saying this isn't important. I personally think this is really kind of like what you do in the early stages of healing to validate what you've been through. But if you stay there and you continue to sow into, you know, wanting justice or wanting, is it retribution? I don't even know the right words, but you know what I'm saying. Like you're just still attached in that way energetically. Then, it, you know, this reminds me of where the Bible says the people that, you know, preach and pray and make it like a show out loud, it's like it says they have their reward. I view it that way too. It's kind of like the people who are wanting to get that that justice or whatever. You're going to have your reward, you know, but then that's it. There's nothing else. The difference is if you don't sow into what you want directly, if instead you just trust that God, remember, it says, he says vengeance is mine. And it also says leave room. So it's like leave that, right? Leave room for God's wrath because it is his to repay, not ours. So if we truly take that to heart and we leave that room there and we focus our our attention elsewhere on something good, which we are directed to do. We're directed to think on the things that are good and lovely and wonderful and you know, the lighter stuff. If we truly do what we're instructed to do in the Bible, and we focus on the good things, right, and we sow into those good things, then any actions, and I'm thinking about my examples in my book here, are like sowing into creative endeavors, like painting or creating inspirational videos, if that's your thing, writing, gardening, playing music or singing, any kind of actions of creating, because again, that's in alignment with the spirit of the creator, right? And so as a child of the creator, you're focusing your energy here into something good. And so if you're pouring out your energy here, to me, the result will actually be twofold. Let me explain. You'll have the direct result of your efforts, whatever it is you've created, right? You may have blessed many other people through your efforts. You may have this finished thing that's beautiful to look at or to use from your efforts. And you'll have this numinous effect or reward from the spiritual realm. It will be intrinsically fulfilling too. So, and again, it's because you're operating in alignment with God's spirit, the spirit of creation, as opposed to the spirit of death and decay and darkness, see? So the more, and sometimes it takes some effort to, you know, validate what you've been through, but you have to kind of steer that ship over here. It's like turning the Titanic around. I've said that a lot, you know, just with my friends and family. That's how it feels. But it's kind of like once you get it going over here, because you're sowing and sowing into the good things, right? The more you do it, and again, it's subtle. It's not an immediate return. You have to have patience, but the more you do it, the more you'll be rewarded. And the more you'll desire it. It's kind of like when you're changing your diet, and at first you're like, you know, whatever it is we eat or drink, we crave that. I don't know if you've noticed, but you have to have discipline in the beginning to change your diet. And then once you force yourself to eat grapefruit, like I did, you'll find that you love it after a while, and you literally, you know, you'll salivate and you'll want it, you'll desire it. And that's good, but it takes discipline at first. That's what I mean by steering the Titanic, right? Trying to turn it around. But the more you do it, the more you'll be rewarded, and the more you'll desire it, until time is going so fast you don't have enough time in your days to do everything you want to do. This is the fragrance. This is the sign that you've made it out of the hard part of healing. This is the sign of renewal. This is the sign of someone living a full life. Okay? And again, like Pocahontas sings, you're painting with all the colors of the wind. Now, again, once again. And just remember, be encouraged, because again, with God, nothing shall be impossible to you. So I hope that this has been inspiring, encouraging. I hope that it got the wheels turning, and I just hope that you have a beautiful day. I thank you so much for coming along to hear the message, and I'll see you again very soon. I'd like to share some of my paintings with you soon too. So again, I hope you're enjoying your day. So thanks again. See you soon.